Hi and welcome to this tutorial. My name is Eric, and in this tutorial I will show you how to draw a simple shape in a two-point perspective using a grid. Earlier this year I did a tutorial on how to draw a perfect square in perspective. I also showed how this could be used to create a grid in perspective, and this is pretty much it. Since then I've wanted to show how this grid could be used to draw something. I was actually going to do a different tutorial on the basics of perspective, and for that one I wanted a railroad, but when I was checking for reference images I spotted these concrete railway ties or sleepers. I first thought I would just use the more simple wooden sleeper, but then I thought well, maybe I can do something a bit more interesting using these concrete railroad sleepers. Now it's a simple shape, but they have some interesting angles, and they'd be a bit more tricky than a simple box. Now I did some research, and there are quite a few different types of concrete railroad sleepers or ties, but I settled for something like this. So I made a blueprint. Now to be able to draw this in 3 dimensions using this kind of grid, we actually need a grid in the 2-dimensional blueprint as well. This way we can map the grids to each other, the 2-dimensional over to the 3-dimensional. So I created this grid, and to make it as easy as possible I aligned the grid with the bottom of the railroad tie, and I also aligned it to the middle, the symmetry lines going through the middle of the railroad ties in this direction and also in this direction. So you can see that the grid is aligned to the middle and to the bottom. If we look at these darker grid lines, we can see that the sleeper is a little bit less than 2 units wide and a little bit more than 1 unit in height. And if we calculate the length of it, we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a little more than 12 units long. Now this is the grid that I created for my last tutorial, and this was just to demonstrate on how to create a perfect square in perspective. So for this, in order to draw this this new shape, I will create a new grid. Now before we start to draw the grid, there are actually 3 things that we need to decide. The first one is the horizon line, the location of the horizon line, and also the location of the vanishing points, but also the scale of the object. So if I place the horizon line and vanishing points like so, and draw the object somewhere in the middle with a normal scale, we would have something like this, and we would simply be looking at the object from below. So it look maybe something like that. If I just make it into a box. Now how often do we see railroad ties floating in midair? Because now we're seeing this is the bottom, and that's not really what we want. So let's try something else. That was a bad example. So another example is, well, we could keep the horizon line somewhere in the middle. We'll do the vanishing points right about there, and we'll make it a little bit bigger, and we might end up with something like this. Oh, my bad, that one should go over there. They should all meet up in the vanishing point. Something like that. I'm being a bit sloppy right now. We'll do this tidy later whenever we decide on what kind of perspective we want. But I mean, this looks very grand, It's huge, and you probably see all the details pretty good, but it doesn't really show that this is a railroad sleeper. Now, if we look at some of the reference images, we have examples like these, where we look at them from above, and these all seem more realistic and tells you more about the object that we're actually drawing. So I would say that we should go for something like this, because the bottom is not very interesting, so we don't want to show that too much. But from this kind of angle, and we don't have that much distortion because the object is small and the vanishing points are off to the sides, this will showcase the sleeper or the railway tie in a much better way, I think. So let's try that. In this case, I'll actually make the vanishing points even further to the side. We'll keep this one here, but the vanishing point on the other side is simply outside of the canvas. So we'll get something like that. And I think that will showcase the object a lot better. Maybe even move this somewhere around here and push the actual object more into the middle of the canvas. But since we're working digitally, we can always do that afterwards, so it won't be an issue. So now I will start to do the grid, and if you saw my previous tutorial, that's pretty much how I did everything, or how I will do everything. So I will just speed this up into a time lapse, and we'll continue this when I'm done. Okay, now that we have decided on where the horizon line is, I'm going to add some assistant tools. The vanishing points. So I will add one vanishing point far out here to the just at the top of the canvas, and far out to the right. So that's one vanishing point, and I'll put one a little bit closer to the canvas, but also I want it to be aligned with the first one as good as possible. Now I started off by doing a square, and I did a square that is much bigger than my original unit. In this case I made it 2 units wide, so I needed to fit at least 6 of these, more like 7 units or 7 squares. I had to extend the canvas in order to get everything to fit. But as I was complete, I could then divide all these squares into 2 equal halves. Now I tried to keep my guidelines, the the purple guidelines separate on a separate layer from the actual grid. And I made a few mistakes during the process, but all is well now. So now we have the grid for the let's say the X and the Y axis, and now we just have to make a grid for the Z direction. So I'll add another assistant. This time I want an assistant for the completely vertical lines. So I'll choose a parallel ruler, and I can create this parallel ruler along a vertical side anywhere, like so. And now I will also be guided while going while doing these vertical lines. So we'll choose another color for the second grid, and I'll put it also on a different layer. Okay, so at this point I have a horizontal grid and a vertical grid. Now the next thing will be to map the two-dimensional objects onto this three-dimensional grid. Okay, now so we can finally start moving into actually drawing the object into this perspective view. So we'll start off with dragging in the actual blueprint. Okay, so now I can see the blueprint at the same time. To illustrate the mapping between these two-dimensional this two-dimensional blueprint and the three-dimensional perspective view, I'd like to highlight a few things. Like, for instance, if we take a point on the blueprint, I want to take this point right here, and it's just on the first. Let's say this is the front view, this is the top view, and this is the side view. Okay, so if we take this point at the end of the side view, that point corresponds to this point, and it corresponds to that point in the two-dimensional blueprint. Now in the three-dimensional blueprint, or the three-dimensional perspective view, that point corresponds to this point. Okay, and that's where the sleeper will be drawn in the three-dimensional perspective view. So we could actually go point by point and adding them into this environment. But first I want to take I want to show you where these lines, this grid, the perspective grid is drawn. So just to highlight that, and this vertical grid from the side view, this is actually drawn here. That's the vertical grid view, vertical grid. And if you see it from the front, it's actually behind the sleeper, like so. And in the top view, it's actually going there. Okay? So we can see it from above, and it's actually going towards us in the top view. Now for the horizontal grid, if we look at it from the side, we can actually see that it's going underneath at the bottom of the sleeper, and also in the front view we can see that it's the same as the bottom of that one, and in the top view it's actually going behind or below, like so. And now, as we what I'll begin with is actually to I want to draw a shape, and I want to transfer it from the two-dimensional blueprint onto the perspective view. And the first shape, I'll try to take something simple, and the most simple shape or simple line in this blueprint is probably the base of the sleeper. So it goes along the bottom here, right there. Oh, let's do this on a different layer, I think. So we'll have some, so we can edit it. Okay. So the line that I'm going to begin to draw is this line that goes along the bottom of the sleeper, and in side view it's this line, but in top view it is this line. So in side view and front view they're pretty basic. It's just along with the horizon line or the horizontal grid. But the only dimension that we need to keep an eye out for is the horizontal plane, like so. So we know it's going to be on the horizontal plane, but we don't know in what where on the horizontal plane it's going to be, and that's when we need this grid from the top view, mainly in this case, and we're going to transfer it onto the three-dimensional perspective. And to know where this is, to know where, for instance, if I want to draw this point right here, I've already drawn the middle point, but this point is somewhere, you see, this is 1 unit, this is 1 unit, that's 1 unit, that's 1 unit, sorry, missed, that's 1 unit. So that distance equals that distance, but it's not in the middle, and it's more to the side, so it's somewhere around there. Now, the finer the grid is, this will become easier, because if we had grid lines all over the place, we could simply, okay, we'll go with the grid line number 35 in that direction, and it would be aligned perfect. But this is more like an approximation of where we're going to start the line and where we're going to finish it. But just to make it a little bit easier, I've actually prepared these grids, so we actually have the same grid lines with these finer grid lines, this half a unit grid lines, as we have in the two-dimensional blueprint. So this will help us a little bit, I think. It will get us a bit more accurate when we do this. So let's start with this. Let's put down some points. I think that's the easiest way to show this. So I have my purple, and I'm going to do that point, and I see now that it's halfway between those. So halfway is a little bit, not halfway, it's a little bit further to the back since it's in perspective, but right about there. And it goes all the way, it's like 1 unit, 2 unit, almost 3 units, and a little bit more than I would say 2.8, so 1, 2.8, somewhere along that line, but intersecting that line. So if we use the guidelines, it's somewhere about there. So this point corresponds to that point. Okay? Next point. This one. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's a bit inwards relative to the last point. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's directly on the 5 line, but a bit inwards, and that would be exactly the same distance. I'm going to move it in a bit. Let's say there. So you can see by the guidelines that this doesn't exactly follow the parallel lines towards the perspective, towards the vanishing point. Okay, this line, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. So I have 5, 6, 7.5. That's where we are, and we'll use the guidelines to get us in to the same position. Now, depending on how accurate you want this to be, you have to do a very fine mesh for the grid. But this is good enough for this, I think. So we have another one, a bit more than 2, 1, 2, and we're about there, and we're going in, and this point is exactly in line with the two first. These first lines, it's going to be exactly in line with those, so I can use the guidelines, and that's about where we are. So that's that point corresponds to that point. And the last point is, let's see here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.5. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.5. So that line over there, that's 12.5. That's the end of the sleeper. And this point is supposed to be in line with that point towards the vanishing point. Great. So now if you just take a line tool, you can actually connect the dots. And this is pretty easy with lines like this. I mean, the shape that we have selected for this demonstration or tutorial is quite boxy. It doesn't have any organic lines. Now, to do something organic like a line like so, you could simply divide this curve into several lines, depending on how close you want the points that you're making, or how short the lines should make. I mean, as long as they're short enough, you won't see much difference. And we'll continue with these points. So just trying to mirror them over to the other side. And I actually don't have to do the lines behind, but I will just for this case, just for the demonstration, because these lines, this line won't be shown. You won't be able to see it because it's behind. It's behind the sleeper. And on this side it goes in instead of out. And all the way over here, there's the differences are so tiny. It doesn't really matter. They're so tiny. So just by missing it by a little bit, it's off by a lot. But at this distance, it doesn't really matter. It's all a matter of how detailed you want it to be, how accurate you want it to be. I mean, if you want it super accurate, you might want to do this in a 3D software where you can model it and create it from there. Okay, so this was the most simple of lines to do. That's the baseline for this sleeper. Let's try this one. That one corresponds to that one. That corresponds to that one. Okay? So, taking a look from the top side, we can see, if we zoom in, that this corresponds to that value from the top and to that value in that direction. And on height, it is almost 1 unit up. Not quite 1 unit, but almost. So take the last point, almost 1 unit up. That's about there. And I'm using this vertical grid now. And on this axis, it was a little bit inside of that. It's a little bit less than 0.5 units, more like 0.4. So that's where it's at. And from the side, it's a little bit between, it's about 0.25 or something. Just about there. So what we want is a dot that follows these. You can actually see it on the horizontal plane. The dot is going to be placed here, and then we just need to trace it upwards until it reaches this position. So let's see here if I want to do these on a different layer as well. Let's see here, and I'll use this. Okay, so, and this is going upwards, and the trick is to find out where is this point in this axis. We actually could trace this line back to the vertical grid and then follow that line up where it meets this guide. And this one, that corresponds to the height of the point that we're looking for. And we just trace that out where till it reaches this one. So that's our point. That's our point right there. So as soon as we leave the comfort of the horizontal plane, it gets kind of complicated, but not super complicated. You just have to keep track on what you're doing. Okay, so we have the guidelines. We'll put that down a little bit with the opacity, so it's clear that that's only a guideline. And if we see here, we can see that if we draw a line from this point, this corner here, this corner, up to that, and that's pretty much what we're looking for. Not quite, because we have some kind of, it doesn't go. Okay, looking at the blueprint, the two-dimensional blueprint, we can see that it doesn't really have the edge doesn't go all the way down. You see that? There's nothing like that, but first it's vertical and then it bends over. So we need, in this case, at this point, we'll try to find that point. And in this case I think we can go forth that point from above. They all coincide with the baseline, but let's try to find all of these because they're all on the same height. Okay, so let's see. But if we look at this one, it doesn't extend exactly vertical from this angle, so it actually slopes backward a bit. And I won't be doing this exactly. I will just estimate how much further back that is. But first we need to figure out the height of this. So we have 0.5 there. So this is more like 0.15, something like that. So this is 0.5. We have 1. We have 0.15, just about there. Let's see, 0.15, just about there. And I'll use the assistant to following this backwards, because this is the height of all these edges that we're going to use. Okay. And in this case, or let's see, we have an edge here, so we'll just use that, follow that line back there, follow it up to the elevation, and then back down to the point. So that's the point where we're at. Okay, we'll do the same thing. It's going to go up there, but in order to know how high, we go back to the vertical grid and then out back to see how high it was. So it's up there. And now it's getting tiny. Like so, and back out to the point, and there. Same goes here. Up, that's the height, out, and here you can see we can actually, yeah, we need to follow this one back there, that one, and back out and down. And now it's just a matter of connecting the dots. If I go out all the way, I know that it's not this point, but it's a little bit more in there, so somewhere around there, I would say. Connect to the actual layer we're going to write on. That's a line, that's a line, that's a line, like so, and like so. There, and from this point we can actually go up to that point where we were. Okay, so next point, I will go for this one. That's the opposite corner. We know that it's around on this line somewhere because it's mirrored. It's symmetric around this point, but we need to find exactly where. So estimate it. This was like 0.4 out, so we need to go 0.4 in the other direction. Let's use the 0.4 in the other direction. Back in there, and then just lift that line straight up where it meets this one. And the same thing goes for this point. Then I will just estimate that this about there. Okay, moving on to the next point. Let's pick this one. Pick this one right here, there, and up there. Let's see here. First do the horizontal plane. It's about 1.3 in. 1.3 estimated. .3 estimated. Estimated, and in this direction it's aligned with that one. So this is the point on the horizontal plane. So now we just have to find the height, and the height is about 1.15 or so units. So it's in the vicinity of, let's pull this line straight up, 1.15, just about there, approximately. So that's the point. And we can actually do the other point at the same time, just following this line because it's symmetric. And let's pull that point right up to find the other point. Okay, so now we're ready to do some more lines. Connecting the dots from that to that, and from that dot to that dot. And we can connect those together like so. At this point we also have one more dot. You can see that this is already aligned. That was already connected from there to there. This line and that line already connected, and we already got that point. So that point is over there. So I can just connect that line to create this edge right there. You see that? That's what we've drawn. That's the line that we drew. Okay? And that one down there. Okay. Cool. Now let's see here. Let's go for this point right there. One, two, 3.5, 0.6. One point 23.6. We can draw a guideline back there. So now it's along that line, and on this line, okay, it's the same as this one. So we can simply continue that all the way back. Same with this one, all the way back. Because from above these lines, this line is completely parallel all the way. You see that? So that's perfect. So we can actually use that. So let's see here. This is the line that we're looking for. And we just need to follow that up. We don't know how high yet. So just take a look here, and that's about it. And it's just a little bit short of that height. So let's follow that line, and there. So it's 1, but it's not 0.15, it's more like 0.1. So we'll stop there. Follow that line out and down. So that's the point we're looking for. Okay? And we can get the other one at the same time, like so. And we'll connect the dots. Okay, cool. And for the next one, next one is this one, and it's on the same parallel with this one on the horizon line, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we already have that one, but it's a bit more inside, so it's up there. Okay, so it's right here, coincides with that value there. So we need to figure out how high. So we follow that line. We'll see here. It's not 1 unit. It's more like 0.9. We follow that line. There's a lot of lines to keep track of, but if we don't lose ourselves, it will be fine. So that's the height. That's 1.9 on this vertical grid. So we just follow that line back out to the point, and that's our point. And we can do the same with this line. Since it's symmetrical, the other point will be there. And we can draw that line as well. From there to there, from there to there. And we also have that line there. And then also it's connected down. There's an edge that connects this dot to that dot. This is the line that we drew now, the last one. That one, and that one. Okay? And we can see it's taking shape. And the next one, over here. There. Yeah, can't see it on this side. Somewhere along here. And we already know it's going to be aligned with that one. And it's also going to be aligned with this one. So that's the crossing point on the horizontal plane going up. And it's going to be the same height as that point. Following that line over there to there. So that's 0.9. And we're going out, and that's the point. Okay, and we have a similar line on the other side. And there it is. So we switch layers. Just do it there. And connect it to that. Connect it there. Okay. So further back there's nothing more interesting over there, but I'll show you how to do this kind of thing sticking out here. So it's on from this plane, there's something sticking out, and what we need to do is actually find, first we need to find this point where it meets the base. That's that point right there, and that's the same point right there. So we need to find that, and taking a look at from this angle, we see that's like 0.45. So it's just in between here, I would guesstimate it. And on this side it's just about there, I would guesstimate it. Okay, that's it for that one. Now let's find this point out here. Okay, so looking at it from this angle, we can see that it's like, oops, .3. So say it's about there, and about there, just going up, and we need to find the height, and the height I would guess is 0.8. So 0.8 is, that's 7.5, that's 0.8. Going that one out there, following that one down, following that point out there to 0.3, and going up, so that's the point. So we need to connect that point with that point, and that point with that point. something like that. And now we need to take a look at this point right there, because that's where it connects to this plane right here, okay? So from this angle it's the same as that point, just a bit more inwards, and from the side is about 0.2, so 0.5, that's about there, I would say. Okay, I'm going up, and it's actually parallel, it's going out there, but just to make sure we can follow this line to the vertical, follow this one up to the height, the same height as that one right there, and then follow that one out towards that point. Yep, I got it right. And the same with this one, going that way, up there and out. Okay, so just a matter of filling those in. Connecting that dot to that dot out back towards the edge there, that one over there, and that one over there. Now I think you get the point, so I'm just gonna time-lapse the rest. Okay, so this is the end result. I hope you could follow all the steps. If you found this tutorial useful, then please give me a like, or please write a comment down below. Also, if you have any questions, I would love to hear them, see if I can help you out. Okay, thanks for watching.